Hello guys, it's your boy Sean here. Today we're stepping into a completely variable shit show. We're going to discuss the history of the Israel Palestine conflict and the most current iteration of it. So it all goes back, well, the long answer is it all goes back to 2,000 plus years ago when various holy books of them, the ones we're most interested in are the Torah and the Quran, all prescribed one strip of land, Jerusalem, as sacred to both the Jews and the Muslims, and the land could only be owned by one, but it was promised to both. And since it's a religious issue, people have been killing each other over it. But we don't have time to discuss the religious implications, so I'm going to basically give you the gist of it. So, the Jewish population had left Israel long before 1947 and long before that point. So, most Jewish people who live in Israel are not descended from the people who lived there 2,000 years ago. And I also want to get this out of the way. I'm not racist. I just believe that Israel's actions towards the Palestinians is at best an outright human rights atrocity, and at worst probably crosses over the moral event horizon that you don't really want to go into. I will not say that Israel's behavior is very similar to the Nazis. I will not say anything particularly inflammatory. I will say that Israel's behavior towards the Palestinians is very similar towards apartheid-era South Africa. The Palestinians are put onto more and more shitty land where they're oppressed, where the police often shoot people for peacefully protesting, where their rights to travel and move are heavily restricted, where access to hospitals, schools, education, jobs, and water are heavily restricted. So I get that this disclaimer is probably not necessary, but I want to make sure that any people who will flag the comments with, will fill the comments with, oh, you're a racist or you're a Nazi, don't really have a leg to stand on. Additionally, I don't want my video taken down. So I want to encourage healthy debate in the comments, but I don't want a flame war. So, unfortunately, the reason why this happened is the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the British got a mandate of it, including Palestine, Israel, West Bank, Gaza, and Jordan, and they had to split it. They gave the piece of Jordan, the piece that was Jordan, because it was originally called Transjordan, to the Hashemites, who were a friendly tribe who helped during the Ottoman War. Granted, this is horribly overly complicated, so they got their monarchy. Israel was split into a partition plan with the UN into two even chunks, even though the chunks were weird because they split the country in half, but they didn't create unified states, and there was very little means for Israel to travel from one where they wanted or the Palestinians to travel. And this whole thing happened because the U.S. government decided after World War II that British and European powers could only get martial aid if they decolonialized, and decolonialization was the right thing to do. However, in this instance, it didn't appear that anyone was really ready to be in charge of this thing. So what happened? There was almost immediate civil war because, the Arab population was still the majority, and, the Israelis, the minority Jewish population, found themselves in control of half the country. And what immediately happened can best be described as other Arab nations started wars. There was civil wars, terrorism, the Israelis ethnically cleansed, or I guess forcibly displaced, a large chunk of the Palestinian population overseas. And then from then on, you pretty much had peace until the Yom Kippur War, where all the nations together teamed up to attack Israel and lost. And Israel survived as a state basically because Western powers decided to back Israel, while the Soviet Union decided to back the Palestinians. And then, so, and so then from that point on, similar trends would continue. There were various wars, like Israel temporarily gained control of the Sinai Peninsula. They ended up with the West Bank, which used to be a part of Jordan. They gained the Gaza Strip, which used to be a part of Egypt. They continued to displace Palestinians. They proceeded to bulldoze Palestinian people's homes, steal their water, build settlements, heavily restrict the ability of Palestinians to travel, ostensibly because of terrorism and such, like terrorists are attacking our land, so we need to ban the Palestinians from entering. But what that had the effect of doing is basically pushing Palestinians into ghettos. So the Palestinians don't really have voting rights. I mean, the government of Israel claims that 1.2 million Palestinians voted in the last election, but that's a small fraction of the actual number. I mean, their parliament gives seats to settlers in the West Bank, which are basically random Jewish people who moved into Palestinian neighborhoods, demolished people's houses, and now essentially want to be part of Israel, not Palestine. And there have been various peace conferences, and the Israelis and Palestinians will agree on a deal, but Israel has always gone back on its end of the deal. Additionally, these periodic intifada, yeah, that's it, intifadas or uprisings are started against Israel rule against Palestine because, the people live in absolute poverty. The ability to get jobs in Israel and to get passes to go to hospitals and schools is pretty lacking. And the program is supposed to reward Palestine for cooperating with Israel. But often what it often does is it basically means that the majority of people are without health care or schools. Whenever an Israeli is injured or something from a rocket attack, they will often bomb apartment buildings, hospitals, and schools indiscriminately. So this is very oversimplified, but basically forced displacement is one of the things they do. Denying the right to movement, targeting civilians, bombing hospitals and schools, attacking targets that are not allowed to talk, shooting and killing an American journalist from a long-range sniper shot, which they've never apologized for or done anything. Police brutality. Oftentimes, you can find videos online of Israeli police or soldiers just randomly shooting or beating the crap out of a Muslim Palestinian for no apparent reason. So basically, it's settler colonialism. The population is pretty evenly split, and that's partially due to the fact that so many Palestinians have been dumped into refugee camps overseas. So refugee camps in Syria, Turkey, Lebanon, so on. And basically, so in the 80s, Israel invaded Lebanon during the Civil War because Hezbollah, Iranian-supported pro-Palestine group, was shooting rockets into Israel. Now, keep in mind that Israel has really good air defenses, and these rockets were probably accomplishing jack shit. Well, they invaded Lebanon, which was in the middle of a civil war. They went into this refugee camp called the Shatila camp. And it was a Palestinian refugee camp, and while a pro-Christian militia from the Civil War came in and decided to start massacring people, the Israeli soldiers did absolutely nothing while witnessing a war crime. So there's a long list of things that Israel did that is very questionable, but Israel often says, oh, you're a Nazi, you're an anti-Semitic, you're a racist. And some people who dislike or hate Israel are racist or anti-Semitic. But a lot of ordinary people just say, the U.S. is spending $5 billion propping up Israel. We're stopping Israel from being issued a harshly worded letter from the UN telling them that their behavior is not legal under constitutional law. Some states in the U.S. have banned your ability to protest by stop buying Israeli goods. basically, part of the problem politically is that neither side wants to touch it. Some conservative politicians don't want to touch it because certain groups of voters believe that in order for a biblical prophecy to be fulfilled, that the Jews have to be in the Holy Land for the apocalypse to happen, for the rapture to happen. And that is a legitimate group of voters. And on the left, you have a pretty even split between the Palestinians and the Jewish population. A lot of Jewish voters support the Democrats basically because they're both liberal and because certain Republican politicians often say racist things. The Muslim voters in the U.S. mostly support the Democrats because the Republicans have said racist things. And it's very interesting because in other countries, like in Europe, the issue, the fact that a lot of Muslim voters are religious results in them voting for right-wing politicians, even if they're anti-immigrant. So the thing is, there have been lots of deals brokered, they never work. And the problem with a two-state solution is Israel has taken enough land from the West Bank and Palestine, and there's too many settlers that the idea of a two-state solution might not actually work anymore. Now, the problem with making, say, Palestine or the West Bank an autonomous territory is I don't think the Israeli government would agree to it. Ideally, you should change the law so that Palestinian refugees could return to their homes, possibly pursue a compensation scheme for that, and pursue a policy in which both groups get to live in a multiracial democracy, kind of similar to South Africa. But the problem is the U.S. spends a lot of effort backing up Israel, and because of those political reasons, and also because we're concerned that we're going to have no friends in the Middle East, and we want someone there to prevent another 9/11. And the problem with that thinking, though, is that Israel oftentimes angers our allies in the Middle East and serves to hurt our image, because imagine your school, home, or hospital got bombed, and the bomb says made in the U.S. Our weapons are being used to commit war crimes in Israel. And I've heard an argument that we should support Israel because, 50,000 American jobs are on the line, but I don't necessarily feel like we should be giving weapons to a regime that is committing war crimes and that shows no sign of stopping. If we want to continue aid to Israel, that's perfectly fine, but it's a suboptimal situation, but I'd consider it possibly okay if we say you have to give Palestinians the right to vote, or you have to set up a quota system to allow Palestinians their representation and such. And the thing is, the reason why this happened, so Gaza's the world's largest open-air prison. It's 2.2 million people who live in basically the size, in an area like the size of the city of Irvine, right? They're crammed in there so tight. It has a very high population density. Israel often cuts off their food aid, stops food trucks from coming in, cuts off their water or power whenever they feel like it, even though it's a war crime. And the thing is, so these people have been oppressed for a long time. Not surprisingly, they rebel again, right? And Israel's like, oh, we didn't know that the Palestinians were going to start something. And it's like, or this is our 9/11, more than 1,000 Israelis have died and a bunch of people got kidnapped. And it's like this happened because there's a video online of you shooting an elderly Palestinian man after coming back from Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, which is another disputed territory because, it's holy to everyone, and the idea of creating an international city is now problematic because, now every piece of land needs to belong to one side or another. So the Palestinians believe that at least half of Jerusalem should be theirs, and they would prefer to have access to Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Israelis say that they should get all of Jerusalem, and that's a big sticking point in negotiations. But, so So they shot and killed an innocent guy with police brutality because, as I said, the Palestinian population are like Israel's black people, if that makes sense. Oppressed and more likely to get shot by the police. So the situation, the thing is, like, the U.S. has never really spent any real effort other than getting these people to a treaty agreement, getting them to have a summit, sign a piece of paper, and then not holding Israel accountable when they walk back on the deal. So, additionally, we give like $2 million to the Palestinians or something for providing social services and aid or something, while we give billions to the Israelis. So the Palestinians don't have much incentive to like put any real effort into keeping their end of the deal, especially if Israel's not going to do theirs. And politically speaking, there's a lot of concern that the Democrats will fracture their party into the progressive and, neoconservative wing over this Israel-Palestine issue, and that would be bad heading into the midterms, because you don't want the party to split facing Trump or facing a very critical election. And the thing is, like, it's pretty evenly split in terms of public opinion. I mean, I know some conservatives who are pro-Palestine, or at least not supportive of Israel. I know some conservatives who are very in support of Israel. I know some liberals who are very in support of Israel, and I know plenty of other liberals who are against it. And the problem is that you're probably not going to gain that many votes if you support Palestine. Like, if you're a progressive representative in the U.S., and you've won election in the past, you're pretty much going to do it again in the future. It's not like you're going to gain extra votes by saying I support Palestine. And again, it's not going to gain much votes from Muslim American voters, and Jewish American voters are a larger block of votes, and you'll piss off some of those. So, but a moderate position which you'd never hear, is something like, oh, I believe that the Israelis and Palestinians should stop killing each other and live together in harmony. But that's an insane position. You can't take that. No, all of our politicians have to be either I support Israel 100%, and if they want to bomb civilians, that's on them, or I'm pro-Palestine and we should stop all support to Israel. So the issue is very complicated, but basically it boils down to geopolitical interests. And so 1,000 or so Jewish people died, a bunch of people got kidnapped, but it didn't happen out of the blue. It happened after another instance of police brutality and, like, perceived insults after, killing some random dude. But the thing is, like, every single one of these intifadas have happened when the Israelis have screwed up particularly badly. And it's been very, very good for the government of Israel, because Benjamin Netanyahu was probably going to get impeached because he was engaging in unconstitutional behaviors, like trying to interfere with the Supreme Court, who wanted to impeach him, monopolizing the media, engaging in questionable behavior towards his opponents. And he probably was going to lose, and there was mass protests in Israel. Now, all this rally around the flag effect because of the war has served to keep him in power for a bit longer. It's like, and the whole hospital bombing, I'm not convinced that it was a stray Palestinian rocket. I mean, Israel has bombed hospitals before, and the only difference in this is that, there's very little evidence one way or another, and and rather than a couple civilians dying, it's a whole bunch of them. And as usual, Israel takes one Israeli settler got a rock thrown at us. Let's bomb 20 Palestinian homes, or someone threw Molotov cocktails at IDF forces who were protecting illegal settlement. Let's bomb a couple of apartment buildings, or a rocket fell on the Israeli side of the border and, it injured someone. Let's randomly kill people. So the response has been overly disproportionate. Like 10,000 Palestinians are killed, and a lot of them and at least 30,000 are injured. which is how it always goes. The Palestinians don't have the weapons, the support, or ability to really do anything. So for the most part, it's really sad to watch some of these videos because you basically get to witness like unashamed brutality with absolutely, and it's just kicking someone while they're gone down. Like in 2021, I believe there was this video circulating online of how Palestinians were building kites to set on fire to throw at the Israeli side of the border so that their crops would burn. It did very minor damage, but then we hear the next week that an apartment block in Gaza is bombed by IDF forces and like 50 people were killed, almost entirely women and children, and now 100 were injured. So the thing is, like, it's a very complicated situation, and for the most part, where your politics are determines where you are on it. If you're a Jewish American, you support Israel. Usually, there are certain groups like Jewish rabbis against Israeli Zionism or what have you, and if you're Muslim American, you generally support Palestine. Most conservatives are for Israel. Most war hawks in general of both parties are for Israel. Most dove and third-party groups have a very complicated situation that's basically like, we dislike Israeli imperialism, we dislike American imperialism, and blah, blah, blah. But it gets very complicated, like how certain third-party left-wing groups like suggested that Ukraine should seek a peace deal with Russia regardless of, how stupid it was. So, but like a lot of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, were like, we have a very complicated position on this issue. Most progressives, like people who voted for Bernie Sanders and, DSA members, and like a lot of those people are pro-Palestine. And honestly, it's just a huge mess because and the thing is, the reason why Palestine or Hamas kidnapped random people is because they wanted something to force the Israelis and other sides to come to the table for a peace agreement. Because even though, Gaza is not technically being occupied, all of its borders are heavily policed and such, and they have no freedom of movement. They're basically trapped there. And so the Israelis are like, we're going to do a ground invasion of it. We want half the population to move south. And it's like, you have to do it in 24 hours. And that was a complete bullshit statement. It's like, you need to leave your homes immediately. If you don't, you agree that you get to be caught in the line of fire. And it's like, sounds like an excuse for you to ignore the rules of war and just commit indiscriminate attacks on civilians. So it's very complicated. Basically, the Palestinians are the original people who live there. The Israelis are, for the most part, mostly settlers, and then you have a Christian population who are basically cut in the middle between the two groups, and you have the West Bank, which has already been heavily flooded by Israelis who don't follow Palestinian laws and who, want to be annexed into Israel and are basically conquering the Palestinians' land. You have at least 5 million refugees of Palestinian heritage, either directly or indirectly, living overseas, who wish they could return to their homes but know that the Israelis are occupying their land. You have the right of return for Jewish people, so if you can prove you're Jewish in any manner, you can return to Israel, but the Palestinian refugees can't return to their homes. You have a foreign policy community that's somewhat distracted by the war in Ukraine, and for the most part is pro-Israel anyway, so they don't care other than letting Israel do whatever they want. We have a president who's an neoliberal who's spent a lot of his time saying, I support Israel. For a while, we had a Congress that was too divided to get a House Speaker, so the bill that would have given funding to Israel as well as increasing deliveries to Ukraine and Taiwan was stuck. And for the most part, the first two are important. I believe that Ukraine should be able to defend its freedom. And a lot of left-wing progressives who believe that, oh, the U.S. started the war by expanding NATO and stuff. Those people are wrong, and we need to defend Ukraine. And Taiwan is very important because they're a free democracy right next to China, and China wants to invade them. So I support the two, but we spend $5 billion every year bailing out, giving Israel weapons, which mostly they use to piss off their neighbors and commit war crimes. And now we have to give them supplemental funding to, engage in more atrocities in the Gaza. No, maybe we should threaten to cut their funding and force them and the Palestinians to come together and hammer out a peace deal like the ANC and the government. But it's a very complicated issue. I know that this is going to start a flame war, and for the most part, I am doing this video at a special request to a friend. And a lot of it is stuff I probably already covered when I was just talking to people. But anywho, Viva Palestina! Long live Palestine. May Israel and Palestine live together in a peaceful, racial democracy like South Africa. May Israel stop its occupation, genocide, and apartheid. And feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. But just know that if you make any comments in the comments section that might get me banned, or that say stuff like Hitler was right, if you say anything like that, I will physically remove any of your comments if they get too questionable. Thank you. Like, comment, and subscribe. This is Sean Hartnett signing out.